Kentrevious Garard's words were, I sprayed that. Words spoken only a couple of hours after he unloaded 22 rifle rounds at and into the red SUV being driven by Jalen McIntyre Bird. He sprayed that up all right. And in his efforts to kill Jalen, he did not care who got in the way. Tragically, 13-year-old Prince Holland had his life ripped away from him at 13 years of age. In addition to Jalen, also Talent Walker was shot. Ezekiel Cooper, Sheed Green have to live the rest of their lives having gone through this traumatic incident. That's what brings us here today. Now, members of the jury, to prove a crime, any crime with state charge, the state must prove two things. One, that a crime was committed. Two, that the defendant committed the crime. Strange things have happened, but I can say relatively confidently that nobody is going to stand up here and tell you the crime was not committed. Nobody is going to stand up here and tell you that the charged crimes were not committed. What I anticipate is that you're going to deliberate in regards to whether the defendant committed the crime. I'm not going to take it for granted, so the state does have the burden, and it's a burden that we gladly accept. And we do have to prove the elements of the charges that we have charged. So as far as murder in the first degree, and this is otherwise known as first degree felony murder, the state must prove several elements. One, that Prince Holland is dead. That is without question. Two, that while engaged in the attempt to commit murder in the first degree, Marcel Joshua Johnson or Kentrevious Garard caused the death of Three, that Kentrevious Garard was the person who actually killed Prince Holland. So, just to kind of clarify here, this charge is the felony charge that we kind of discussed in jury selection. It's one of those charges where it's based on an underlying charge. And in this instance, it's attempted first-degree premeditated murder. And that, as we discussed, is a crime that is so susceptible to violence that if somebody dies during the crime, the state can charge first-degree felony murder. And we'll get into the elements of first-degree premeditated murder, because the state has to prove that underlying charge in order to prove the first-degree felony murder. As far as the first count, in order to convict the defendant of first-degree felony murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove that the defendant had a premeditated design or intent to kill. So, again, to clarify, this first count is in reference to Prince Holland alone. So what this is saying is that we do not need to prove that anybody had a premeditated design or intent to kill Prince Holland. The actual attempted first-degree murder will be as the Jalen McIntyre murder. And so to prove attempted first-degree murder, premeditated murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond reasonable doubt. That Kentrevious Garard intended to commit the crime of first-degree premeditated murder. Two, that the defendant committed an overt act toward the commission of first-degree premeditated murder that went beyond mere preparation. Three, that Kentrevious Garard failed to complete the first-degree premeditated murder. So again, let's talk about these elements here, because this is the underlying charge for the main charge of first-degree felony murder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of speak about this in the abstract, because we're going to take the defendant out of the equation We're going to just talk in terms of whether the crime was committed. And in this instance, what we have is 22 rounds shot at and into the SUV. As to the first element, nobody shoots into a vehicle 22 times, or at a vehicle 22 times, without trying to kill somebody inside. They're not trying to scare the people inside. They're not trying to just hurt the people inside. That is absolutely an act that is designed to kill somebody inside. That is a premeditated act, trying to kill someone inside. As far as the second element goes, again, this abstract person committed an overt act for the commission of first-degree premeditated murder. Well, obviously somebody been shot 22 times. That was an overt act. 4. And a 3, that this person failed to complete the first-degree premeditated murder. And in this instance, again, since this charge is in reference to Jalen, Jalen is still alive. So the person trying to kill him failed to do that, failed to kill him. So, definition or the instruction that you've already received from the judge in regard to attempted first-degree murder includes a description of what the state would have to prove if we had proven first-degree murder. In other words, if Jalen had died. That would be 3 elements: that Jalen is dead, that the death was caused by the criminal act of the defendant. Shooting at a vehicle, without question, criminal act. That there was a premeditated killing of Jalen McIntyre Burroughs. And if Jalen had been killed in this instance, the person firing into that vehicle, at that vehicle, 22 times, was absolutely trying to kill Jalen. Let's be clear on that. Okay, there was 4 other juveniles in that vehicle. Prince Holland was 13, Talent Walker was 11. Nobody's trying to kill those juveniles. Jalen McIntyre Burroughs, and you'll see the evidence as far as why he was the target. He was absolutely the target of the shooting. And so going back to the first-degree felony murder, again, we just have to prove that in the process of trying to accomplish this attempted first-degree murder, Prince Holland was killed. And there are 2 other elements, again, that the defendant committed the act, and that he was the one that actually killed. Alright. So as to the 3 other juveniles in the vehicle, Talent Walker, Ezekiel Cooper, Rasheed Green, the state has charged attempted second-degree murder. And they all survived, so that's why this is attempted second-degree murder. And what the state needs to prove in order to prove those 3 counts, following 3 elements. We've grouped this into one because it's the same as to each of the 3 juveniles. So as to that, counts 3 and 4 and 5, we need to prove that somebody intentionally committed an overt act that could have resulted in the death of Talent Walker, but did not result in Talent Walker's death. And it's the same for the other 2. And this very clearly is an act that somebody engaged in that could have killed him, because it in fact killed Prince Holland. They just as easily could have been killed from the shooting. The act was imminently dangerous to another and demonstrated a depraved mind without regard to human life and for human life. And we'll read this instruction in a second as far as the definition of what that means, because there's a little bit of legal jargon there. Step 3. The overt act went beyond mere preparation. Again, shooting actually occurred. It wasn't just plotting in a basement. All right, so when it comes to attempted second-degree murder, what does it mean when an act is imminently dangerous to another and demonstrates a depraved mind? Well, what that is an act, a series of acts that a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another. And nobody's going to tell you that shooting at or into a vehicle that many times is not reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury. And that it is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent. I'm beating the dead horse here, but again, nobody does that. Nobody shoots at a vehicle that many times with a good intent. This is absolutely done out of ill will, spite, evil intent, hatred, and evil intent. And it's of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. And you fire into a vehicle with multiple people inside, 22 times. That is absolutely indicative of a complete indifference to human life. And it's something that somebody does, and their mind says, I don't care who gets hit, I don't care who dies. In this instance, again, we had several people that were hit, aside from, 2 people that were hit aside from the target. And again, to convict the defendant of attempted second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove the defendant had an intent to cause death. So that's what separates this from attempted first-degree murder. There does not have to be any intent to kill anybody. Something that is so depraved that it's expected to hurt or kill somebody, but there does not require any intent to kill. All right, you've been instructed on the lesser included crimes of main charges. I'm not going to go through these, so I'll spare you. But what lesser included crimes are, as you were instructed, is that they are basically crimes that are essentially subsumed into the main charge. They're crimes that have the same elements but might be missing 1 or 2 elements of the main charge. And so you will be instructed on lesser included, or you've already been instructed on lesser included. You will have this back there to read in the event that you want to examine those further. But when it comes to first-degree felony murder, lesser included is manslaughter. When it comes to attempted first-degree premeditated murder, lesser included are attempted second-degree murder, attempted manslaughter by act, attempted aggravated battery, and attempted battery. And then when it comes to attempted second-degree murder, lesser included is attempted manslaughter by act. And one thing that you will be asked to find on your verdict form, do you find the defendant guilty of the main charges or any of these lesser included? And just about all of them, you will be asked to find whether or not the defendant possessed and discharged a firearm causing death or great bodily harm. That will be a finding that you need to find. And there are other options there as well, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't need.
You may. Move the receiver to the USB hub so it ranges. Bear with me.
Thank y'all for your patience. So, all right. So why are we here? This is the second thing that stands to prove that the crime was committed and that the defendant committed the crime. I'll just lay out an outline sort of format what the state will show you indicates that this defendant committed the crime committed the crimes that are charged. The state has demonstrated motive, reason for him to do this. They have demonstrated consciousness of guilt. We presented cell data that is corroborated evidence that the state has presented. Then the defendant's own words. One thing to be clear on when it comes to the evidence itself. The state has to prove the elements of the charges. The elements of the charges beyond reason. The evidence is up to you to weigh. It's up to you to determine what to disregard, what to think that weighs heavily, etc. But the state does not need to prove every piece of evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. So if there's a piece of evidence that you don't think you should regard, that doesn't mean that the state's case is sunk. Really, it's a matter of everything together, everything considered collectively, whether or not the state has met the elements. Make sure I state that before going into the evidence. Let's talk about motive. And for purposes of establishing the motive here, it would be appropriate to kind of lay out the background here. All right, provide a backdrop to what happened. So what we have here, and what you've heard, is that this ongoing dispute between groups known as 3 and 320. These disputes go back to 2019. A barbershop incident occurred where somebody shot up or shot at the barbershop, and in that incident, Emmanuel Pringle's brother, Isaiah Pringle, was shot in the head and permanently blinded. Also shot during this incident was Marcel Johnson. Things were kind of quiet between that 2019 and 2022. There was an incident after a football game where Jalen McIntyre Burroughs and Kobe Johnson got into a fight. Not a whole lot until January 2022. And that is when an individual known as Wicks was murdered. He was known as a member of the group 3. Also in January 2022, perhaps coincidentally, perhaps not, Kobe Johnson purchases a Zastava rifle that was used as a murder weapon in this case. June of 2022, Joshua Holmes, who was a member of 320, was killed. And as you heard from Kobe Johnson, their thought was that 3 was responsible for killing Joshua Holmes. After Joshua Holmes is killed, Corey Poole, who is with 3, then puts out a rap video where he disrespects Joshua Holmes, deceased individual. And what you kind of see here is, again, like I said, there was an incident in 2019, one in between, but what you start to see in 2022 is sort of an escalation in a sense, more frequent incidents where things seem to be ramping up for one reason or another. Because what you also have after those incidents is in September of 2022, Kobe Johnson was jumped at a car wash fundraiser. Jalen was there, his brother, Marquise Holloway, was there at a later point in time, and according to Kobe, Marquise was one of the people jumping him. As he also testified that Marquise Holloway is known as a member of 3. Kobe thought that Jalen told the others or let the others know that he was there, leading to him being jumped. And as he was being jumped, beat up on the ground, he stated that the group was chanting F Josh, reference to Joshua Holmes, and R.I.P. Wicks was in reference to Wicks, who was murdered earlier in the year. And Kobe also testified that while he's getting beat up on the ground, he's yelling back at them, threatening them, telling them that he's going to get back at them. After this incident occurs, Kobe FaceTimes his brother, Marcel, shows him the injuries. And you've had that in evidence. You're able to see that that FaceTime shot. A couple of other incidents are in background. There was one where Kobe was at a gun range. He was shooting a gun, posted it on social media, whatever reason. He said that Jalen laughed, reacted to the post. He also said that in this post, he received comments where Marquise Holloway was threatening to kill Kobe. And there were other threats to kill Kobe, so much so that he felt the need to leave town. He went to Tallahassee for a little while. He also felt the need to get rental cars. He didn't want to be driving around in a car that people knew he drove. In addition to that, Marcel is producing rap videos, and because of some of the stuff that he's putting in his rap videos, Marquise Holloway is also threatening him. Before weeks passed, he was also making threats towards Marcel. What does that have to do with Mr. Garard? Well, Mr. Garard was very good friends, best friends, with Marcel Johnson, who was in 320. The defendant was known as Twin in Marcel Johnson's phone. Twin is a term of endearment for somebody who's very similar, somebody very close to you. That was his nickname in Marcel Johnson's phone. And Kobe also talked about how they were really close. And so one of the motives here is that based on that friendship, the defendant wanted to get revenge for Marcel Johnson being shot in that 2019 barbershop incident. He was also best friends with Emmanuel Pringle. Again, Mr. Pringle testified and said that he considered him a brother. Another reason why this defendant wanted to get revenge, because Emmanuel Pringle's little brother, Isaiah Pringle, got shot and was blind. On top of this, there was the jumping of Kobe. That's another thing where, again, his best friends, or one of his best friends, younger brothers, got jumped. That's another reason why he wants to make sure he gets revenge in some fashion. He's in rap videos with Marcel, showing that they have this close connection. I don't know anything about it, but I don't think people put just anybody in their videos or any music that they put out. They're close friends. That was this defendant. He was close with Marcel. He was in rap videos with him. Bottom line is as much as the defendant wants to distance himself from 320, he was close to 320. He testified himself that he was good friends with Emmanuel Pringle, 320. He was good friends with Marcel Johnson, 320. Good friends with Kobe Johnson, 320. He was friends with all these members of 320. So yeah, he's close. He is invested in this group and wants to help them do whatever revenge that they might want to get on Jalen. Then there was the testimony from Jalen, the message he saw to Marquise Holloway. This defendant said, "Better slippers count." And as Jalen explained, slip means to basically be caught off guard. Caught with your pants down, however you want to put it. Basically, caught without being ready to protect yourself. And I would submit to you that what this message means, that people who are good at evading being attacked or being ambushed or whatever, that they count more. Then, of course, you have the photo of the Sestava on the defendant's iCloud account. And I recognize that this was months before. And also, I'm not going to sit up here and pretend that this indicates that this is a photo he took. We recognize that this was a photo that was on his phone, therefore he could have received it. The bottom line is whether he took it or whether he received it, it shows that he absolutely had knowledge of this Sestava rifle, which is on the right side of this photo. And this is the Sestava rifle that Kobe bought. It's the one that was used in this shooting. What other evidence do we have that ties this defendant in? Well, calls and location data. Calls from Marcel Johnson to this defendant start around 12 p.m. on December 3rd, 2022. Around 3:58, Johnson calls the defendant about 3 minutes after dropping off his grandmother in a blue Kia Rio. We've also seen surveillance where he gets into, or leaves the building around 2 o'clock p.m. and gets into the blue Kia Rio. Location data shows that Marcel traveled to 7th Street, which is where this defendant lived. And when he gets to the tower, or he's pinging from the tower that's closest to where the defendant lives, at 4:19 p.m., he calls Garard. And after that call stopped. Why did they stop? Because they were together at that point. Don't need to call him, he's right there. Multiple calls before, and there were a couple calls after that. Last one being around 4:24 p.m. And then after that, the next call that comes out of Marcel's phone is around 6:36 p.m. About 15 minutes or more after the murder. At 5:45, Johnson's cell phone stops communicating with the network. And you've heard testimony about how that can mean that it might have just died, and perhaps that happened. We know that the phone was put in airplane mode. As I believe it was Agent Blythe testified. It doesn't show, the data does not show, for some reason, when a phone is put in airplane mode, but it does show when airplane mode is turned off. So Marcel's cell phone is communicating with the network up to about 5:45. Granted, there was a brief moment where it was turned back on, or showed usage at 6:13 or 6:15 p.m. access maps. But otherwise, there was no communication with it. We had a murder at 6:19. And then Johnson's phone is turned on again 15 minutes after the murder. Then we know that it was in airplane mode because airplane mode was then turned off. Now let's talk about the usage or lack thereof of Garard's phone. Because there's been a little bit of an issue made of that. And this is not a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that counsel told you in openings. But because that presumes there are only two possibilities here. Either that he has it on him or he doesn't have it on. But there's a third possibility. He's at home with the phone. One would still expect to see usage, calls, texts, answering calls coming in. None of that is there. And this data communication that shows that there was data being uploaded or received, that's not reliable. And I don't want you to think for a second that I'm telling you just to throw it out the window. I'm telling you, if you compare it to the other data sessions that you see on that same spreadsheet, you will see one that starts at about 2 a.m. on the morning of December 3rd and goes until around the 5:15 or so, whatever that time may be. The point being is that the defendant testified that he was asleep when his girlfriend arrived late in the morning of December 3rd. He was not using his phone. So that clearly shows you that that data session spreadsheet does not indicate somebody is actually using it. And that is the only thing that the defense is pointing to, showing or claiming that this is indeed indicative of him using his phone in some fashion. And I'm just telling you that that is something you can disregard because when you compare it to the other evidence, it doesn't indicate anything for you. But what you do know from the data, the cell data, is that he was not texting, not calling, not answering any calls, anything like that. And the reason why we know that this phone wasn't just broken or lost or whatever the case may be is because after the murder, Now all of a sudden there is activity. There's a call to Kobe. There's a lot of activity showing Garard traveling. Another thing you'll see on some of the evidence that you have in front of you regarding this phone is that there's a lot of activity on December 2nd. There's a lot of activity on December 4th, but very little activity on December 3rd. So again, the phone stopped showing the communication with the network. Then you have surveillance footage. And what the surveillance footage shows is that this blue car was absolutely stalking this red SUV. It is the only vehicle that you see throughout the entire series of videos. I'll show you in a moment what I mean by that. But the point is that this was a vehicle that was absolutely following the red SUV, and that this was them two. This is Mr. Garard, Mr. Johnson looking for an opportunity to open fire on that SUV. So after you see the red SUV turn out of the Legend Center, or at least coming down Sutel Drive, about 10 seconds later, you see that blue Kia Rio pull off of a side road and quickly accelerate in the same direction. And what ends up happening is sort of unexpected, sure. Because there's an ambulance that is going towards a crash off of Sutel Drive. And what you see from a liquor store video is you see the defendant's vehicle, the blue Kia Rio, sitting there just next to the parking lot of the liquor store. And you see the red SUV come pulling up, meaning that the blue car inadvertently passed the red SUV. And then you can just kind of see the red SUV slowly kind of pull up right next to the blue car. And you can kind of even feel the awkwardness as you see that blue car sort of just peel off to the right, drive through the parking lot, the liquor store, disappears off from the camera. And as you heard Detective Mitley testify, that there is a road there that vehicle could have just gotten on that takes you right back onto Sutel Drive. So the next footage that you see is from Walgreens, and we'll look at that in a second. But that's the Walgreens that is at Sutel Drive and Moncrief Road. And then at 6:18, you have footage of the murder itself from a distance. And what you see in that footage is you see the SUV pull up behind a white Charger. And one thing to point out when we start talking about this white Charger is that the bullet holes for the red SUV, for some of the bullet holes, were found on the back of the vehicle. It was literally impossible for somebody in the white Charger to be the one shooting at this vehicle. And as a reminder, this was 22 rounds from the same firearm, according to Megan Sarnak, the FPLE. This was also 22 rounds that were fired from consistent with his Zastava rifle. It had a little ring around the backside of the casing where the pin hits, which is something that is relatively unique to the Zastava rifle. She said that those casings all had that. So all of these casings, all of these shots come from the same firearm. So there's no way that one firearm shooting from one direction and another firearm shooting from another direction. That's not what happened here. All 22 rounds came from that Zastava rifle. But there's more about that white Charger. And in that video, you're able to see, and again, it's not easy, but I would submit to you that you absolutely can make out who is who in the video. And we'll see in a second. But what you see is the Kia Rio kind of pulled along the left side, because again, Moncrief Road at that point, at New Kings Road, has 3 lanes. You turn left, you turn right, and go straight. The red SUV is in the middle lane to go straight, and you can see the headlights of the Rio pull up along next to the SUV, and very shortly thereafter you see muzzle flash, one of the muzzle flashes at least. Then you see the cars speed off. So, when we look at this video, again, we already have two vehicles that are in the middle lane waiting for the light to turn. And you see, and what you see is you see one vehicle that is coming to the middle lane, and then behind that, you see the white Charger. And you can make it out, it's white, I mean, it's not completely not visible. You see that car pull up behind, and then what you see in the distance behind, with the fog lights, is a red SUV that begins pulling up behind the white Charger. And then from here, again, I encourage you to look at this as much as you need to, but from there you see one car pass to the right, and one car come up on the left side, and then you see the muzzle flash. And then what you see are these two cars, one being the white Charger hightail. After that, you see the blue car, which is still shot there. You see it, you can't see it cut off the vehicle that's going straight, but you see it come around and then it appears again, hauling butt in the direction that you see it hauling right now. So let's talk about this white Charger, because there's been a lot made of it, and again, the evidence frankly excludes this white Charger completely. The evidence actually excludes any other vehicle except for that blue vehicle. So this white Charger, let's talk about first, who's in the white Charger? Jacob Olds. You heard from Jacob Olds. Nobody knows who Jacob Olds is. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he testified he was just protecting his family. But you heard from Kobe Johnson. No idea who Jacob Olds is. He had to ask Mr. Brown, who's that? You heard Emmanuel Pringle. No idea who Jacob Olds is. There's no indications, not in any of the rap videos. He's not somebody who had a close friend or family member shot by 3 or 320. He's not involved in that at all. And as I stated, he is in front of the SUV at every clip you see. Go back and watch in front of that. Now the question is, okay, so if he's there in front of the vehicle and he's somehow involved, why is he there? What is he doing? It makes zero sense for him to be up there in front of this red SUV, at times 7 seconds ahead of the red SUV. If he's trying to help in some way, he's doing a really bad job at it. So one thing to focus on is this video from Walgreens. Because what you will see on this video is, and I'll stop it there. You'll see in the distance, and again, these are things that you're going to have to probably look harder at because it might not do it justice where you're looking right now. But you will see the red SUV pull up to the light at Sutel and Moncrief. You see it slow down and stop. And the reason it's doing that is because, as you can see, traffic on Moncrief is now going whichever direction that is. So they're crossing over Sutel. So that car waits, or stops and waits for vehicles to cross over Moncrief. And what you will see from this is that every vehicle that you see from this point forward, aside from the blue Kia Rio, coming across on Moncrief, coming from Moncrief over Sutel. They're not turning behind this SUV, they're not turning in front of this SUV. The other one is that a vehicle that you'll see pulled out of the Walgreens parking lot. That also is one that you'll see in other footage. Then what you see is after the red SUV turns, in the video, if you play it, you can see the blue Kia then accelerating very quickly towards the red SUV. But here's another view from the rec center on Moncrief Road. And it starts with, you can see the white Charger, and you're welcome to count if you want to, but you can see it up at the top left, it's at 18:18 and 9 seconds. You see that white Charger pass, another vehicle pass, then you see the red SUV. So 9 seconds was when the target pass, red SUV passes it. So 7 seconds later, but what you see right behind that red SUV is the blue Kia Rio. Right behind it. On its tail. Again, all those other vehicles that you saw in that video, you can go back and trace them back to the Walgreens video and see that they were coming from Moncrief. They were not coming down Sutel, turning onto Moncrief. Only 2 cars that you see do that, red SUV. But I would submit to you that that white Charger is it's called a red herring. It's something that distracts you from the important stuff. It's something that will send you on a wild goose chase if you really let it. As the evidence shows, that white Charger was not involved. And in the same vein of red herrings, Juan Thomas falls in that category as well. So, as you heard, Juan Thomas's statement was about 37 minutes after the shooting. About 37 minutes after the shooting, he posts on social media, "If you think I did it, then I guess I did it," or something along those lines. Much has been made of that. But one question about a statement like that is, why would you blast that on social media and implicate yourself immediately in a murder? Especially a murder where a 13-year-old has died. It doesn't make sense. But I will acknowledge the fact that there are people out there who are, quite frankly, sick.
You can proceed. Ms. James was just going to inform me what it is.
Yes, sir. There are people out there who are sick and who will claim responsibility for things like this, for one reason or another. And Juwan Thomas takes it a step further in another instance where somebody's asking him about the shooter in this incident. And he says that you might be talking to him along those lines as well. So again, he's taking credit for this for some reason. He is not involved in this. How do you know that? Well, even if it doesn't make sense that he's making this post 37 minutes after the murder, it's still a lead. A lead that the detectives have to follow up on, make sure that they run it down. And they did. Detective Mitton still investigated it. He got several search warrants for cell phone numbers that might be connected to Juwan Thomas. He could not find anyone that was confirmed as connected to Juwan Thomas. One of the numbers, he was able to look it up, it pinged at the same, from the tower that's closest to the crime scene. As you heard, however, Juwan Thomas lives right there near the crime scene. The other of the numbers pings at a location nowhere near this crime scene. So again, the detective Bentley continues to follow up on this, but he goes further. He tries to determine whether or not there is anybody close to Juwan Thomas, close family, friends who have a blue sedan. Not even a Kia Rio, a blue sedan. See if there's somebody that he had access to use that blue car. Couldn't find anybody. At the end of the day, through Detective Mittling's investigation, he could not confirm any connections between Juwan Thomas and the individuals involved in this incident. So, of course, he's not going to continue down that road. And more importantly, at this point, he's got Marcel Johnson's cell phone data showing him go to 7th Street, call the defendant, immediately stop making phone calls for another couple hours up to and after the murder. So they have a much stronger lead that they're following up on in regard to this defendant. And more importantly, though, it's something that where Juwan Thomas becomes very clear to them that he is not a suspect in this, despite his foolish statements. What other things happen? Well, again, as to Marcel's phone at 6:36 is the next activity. We see that his phone is powered on, airplane mode turned off. As we stated, that is something where you can only see it being turned on, so there's no, actually I apologize, that should be, wrong. So at 7:50, you have the defendant call Kobe Johnson. We'll talk a little bit about that supposed conversation at some point, but based on that phone call, Kobe and Emmanuel Pringle go over to Garard's house. How do we know that they went to Garard's house? Well, we have the cell phone data, the location data that shows Kobe, Marcel, and Garard all at the same location. And I know you've heard some testimony about, well, it doesn't tell you the exact location that, it doesn't say if I'm standing right here, that I'm standing right here. It only gives you a general idea. Well, let me ask you this. Does it make sense that the defendant's calling Kobe, and then Kobe just happens to end up in the same, very close to being specific area? That's not a coincidence, okay? They're hanging out together. They are together. And we know that because of the evidence that we continue to see after this. After this, they go to, they take the car by Pete's, who is a friend who cleans cars. I would suggest to you that that is absolutely an act to try and get the vehicle clean because of what they had just done in it. And then they had Kobe take the car back to the grandma's. And Kobe had his own car, so he had Emmanuel actually drive the blue Kia Rio. And also just going back to at Garard's house after he called Kobe, Emmanuel Pringle's GPS also was tracking him and showed him at a more precise location, but still showed him at that 7th Street location at Garard's house. So again, he's also one of the individuals that came over. And again, we have proof that he's over there. This is not just speculation. At 8:18, they go to the park. And how do we know that? Because we see all of that. Again, this defendant's data, Marcel's. You see Emmanuel Pringle's GPS. We track them, or they're tracked to that park, where they then, Emmanuel Pringle and Kobe Johnson hear this defendant make that statement. I sprayed that bitch up. And in front of Kobe, at least as far as Kobe testified, he also heard something about the defendant saying he saw Prince's head hit the window. Let's talk about Kobe Johnson. You will be instructed, or you have been instructed in regard to factors that you can consider in weighing the credibility of witnesses. And you'll have these instructions so you can read them back over if you need to. But there are several things that the court has instructed you what you should consider using your common sense. One of those things is, does a witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? Well, let's apply that to Kobe Johnson. Yes, he does. He does not want to see either defendant be in trouble. He testified he did not want to be here. He was forced to be here by subpoena. But he picked him up and brought him here. He was forced to be here by subpoena. As far as his testimony goes, it was very evident that he was doing what he could to try and help the defendant. So what are we looking at here as far as what he has said? When he first is contacted, he first denied everything. Did not want to talk to the police. He mentions nothing about a barbershop, mentions nothing about his Gestapo rifle, mentions nothing about being jumped earlier in the year. So basically, again, almost completely refused to talk to the police. But when he took the stand here and testified, at no point in time did he say, I lied. Whether that was to the detectives at a later point in time, whether that was at the prior proceeding, or whether that was even here. At no point is he saying, did he say, I lied, or did he say, I'm lying about hearing what I heard? He maintained what he heard, and that was Garard's statement, I sprayed that bitch. Driving off. He talked about being pressured to say what they needed me to say. Well, again, he had to be subpoenaed to be forced to go to the prior proceeding. At the end of the day, nobody told him what to say. And you'll see in a second that he talked about Emmanuel Pringle supposedly giving a statement that the detectives then relayed to him about spraying it. And the problem with that is that Emmanuel Pringle didn't tell the detectives that until a month after they talked to Kobe, and Kobe gave them that statement. So it's things like that that you see where Kobe is trying to help defendants. But going further into this prior statement with Kobe, when he first disclosed it, he had an attorney there. Hard attorney that is there making sure that nothing, goes bad or is done that's improper. Police are not going to, in front of an attorney, going to make threats. Going to try and do anything that other than tell the defendant that he needs to come forward and tell the truth. Otherwise, that would be very dumb on their part to do that in front of a bar attorney. As I mentioned earlier, nobody put Emmanuel Pringle's statement in front of him because it was impossible. Pringle had not given a statement by that. Kobe Johnson's testimony, he said nothing about Grand Theft Auto. Recall, Emmanuel Pringle brought up. Said nothing about Grand Theft Auto. Talked about playing NBA 2K in some football game. But one of the main questions to ask yourself is why on earth would he implicate Garard? This is his older brother's, or at least one of his older brother's best friends. Why on earth, if he is feeling this pressure to just pull a name out of thin air, is he going to bring up Garard's name? Why not just make up a name? John Smith, it's Slim, it's Drop, whatever. Why would he bring up that name? Especially since it's clear after him coming in and testifying that he's trying to protect Garard. Doesn't make sense. The other thing is, that was brought out, was that whenever Kobe first talked about what he actually heard, he didn't mention the head hitting the window. He brought that up in the proceeding where he testified. Now that is a bigger question. Why on earth would you fabricate that? That sinks Garard even more, and it does not protect Marcel. The defendant testified that when he asked, why would Kobe make that up? He said, I don't know, he was trying to protect Johnson. Why on earth, how does that protect Marcel Johnson? When they're known good friends, when the evidence shows that they were together that day, how does that protect him by saying an additional thing that he heard about Prince's head hitting the window? Makes zero sense. And again, you all brought your common sense here, hopefully. I asked you if you would, and hopefully you have. Makes zero sense for him to make that kind of a statement up out of thin air again. And again, he'd already given his statement. All he had to do was come in and say, yep, he said that he sprayed up. Thank you, bye. He added that, again, the only explanation for him adding that is because at that point he was under oath. Talk about Emmanuel Pringle. Same boat as Kobe Johnson. Did not want to be here. Did not want to be testifying. Sure as heck did not want to get his brother, as he referred to him. But he came in anyway. Just like Kobe, at no point in time did Emmanuel Pringle say, you know what, I lied on that prior occasion. Or, I said before that, I heard him say I sprayed that bitch up, but again, that wasn't true. But what he did do, instead of saying I lied, he said, well, he was talking about Grand Theft Auto. So let's think about that for a second. These are a group of grown men going to a park to hang out at night. They're bragging about playing a video game. I don't play video games, so maybe I'm lost on this one, but I have common sense, and I can tell you that I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever that a bunch of grown men are going to go to a location and brag about what they did on a video game earlier in the day or earlier in the week, whatever the case may be. The statement itself does not make sense, but what's more important is that statement about this being about Grand Theft Auto, that was not something that was said until he was deposed, his deposition was taken. Because when he was interviewed by police, he said, what, seven plus times that about the spraying that up. Not one time did he mention Grand Theft Auto. Not one time did he say, well, yeah, he said that, but, you know, we were all bragging about playing Grand Theft Auto and shoot things up on the game. It didn't happen. That's because what he realized is that he got Garard in trouble with that statement. He knew he messed up. His way of trying to backtrack back out of that statement was to claim that this is somehow involved or somehow about Grand Theft Auto. But just like Kobe, why implicate Garard? His brother, as he refers to him. Why? Same thing. Why not make up a random name or a random friend? Why not make up a person that you know exists but is very loosely connected to the whole situation? Why would he say that Garard said that? Doesn't make sense for him to just make that up against Garard. So, what you have is one of the other considerations that you will have whenever you are deliberating is the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court. And we do have that. But again, it's not something that they changed to help the state. It's things that they are changing excuse me, to try and help Mr. Garard. Another consideration that you'll have is, does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony and other evidence in the case? Yes. Kobe and Emmanuel's statements agree with each other. Again, Emmanuel didn't add in the part about seeing Prince's head hit the window, but they are consistent. And what they also are consistent with is them talking about going to this park at night at 8:18, hanging out. And that's all consistent with their testimony. That's consistent with the data, cell phone data that you see. It's consistent with Emmanuel Pringle's GPS monitor. Yeah, the testimony is consistent. It was consistent with the other evidence in the case. Let's talk about Mr. Garard's interview. One of the things he says is that he has never seen that blue Kia Rio before. Oops. He also said that he was playing NBA 2K. Didn't mention anything about Grand Theft Auto. He claimed that he was at home with his girlfriend all night. And he called Kobe to just bring a controller over for a video game. Touch upon that briefly. He talked about the fact that he was playing video games with Marcel for a while before they went off to the car. Before Kobe came over. They were playing video games for a while. Why does Kobe need to bring a controller over? Oh, well, because the controller doesn't work that well. So you've been using this controller that doesn't work. It does not make sense why he's calling Kobe to bring over a controller for a video game, because that's not what he did. He was calling Kobe over after and talk about what just happened as far as shooting goes. Before December 3rd, in his interview, he said that he hadn't seen Johnson since September. Didn't hang out often. But nevertheless, he was very upset that Johnson forgot his birthday. People that don't hang out barely. hadn't seen him since September, but he forgot his birthday in November, and that really hurt his feelings. Makes sense. And we know that it doesn't make sense because we see other statements. So as far as the interview goes, some of the things that he said that indicates his consciousness of guilt. He downplays his friendship with Marcel. Again, it says that they hadn't hung out since September. But then he's super upset because Marcel forgot his birthday. The problem is that the day of the murder, there were multiple calls between he and Marcel earlier in the day. So if these are people that are not hanging out, why are they calling each other multiple times in the morning, early afternoon? After the murder, they are calling each other 1 or 2 times. He lied about ever seeing the blue Kia Rio before. And he's confronted with the fingerprints. And in the telephone call that you hear between he and his girlfriend, Miss Karen Yago, he acknowledges, I messed up because I lied about ever seeing that car before. And of course he says, well, of course I've been in that Rio before. It's my friend's car. In paraphrasing. But also, his statement there makes the DNA evidence practically useless because he's admitted to being in the car. We know he's good friends with Marcel. We know that he's been in the car multiple times before. Finding his DNA in there is not going to prove anything other than that he had been in the vehicle before. We expect to see. But it shows you how unreliable DNA can be at times because he was excluded one or more of the samples that were collected from the car. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything. He lied about never leaving the house that night. And again, he was confronted with the cell records at that point and then said, I went to Brooklyn. Typo there. I went to Brooklyn. Again, caught with the evidence, changes his story, says, oh yeah, I did go to Brooklyn. And he testified on in his direct that he had just forgotten about that. Important detail about going to Brooklyn. In that same phone call you hear with his girlfriend, he tells her to tell police what he told her. Talk about that in a moment, but he also warns her that they will try to break her down. He said, break you down. What does that mean? What are they going to break her down about? What are they going to force her to say that isn't the truth? He's worried about her breaking down. That would indicate she's got something to protect. That something to protect is that she knew that he had not been there the whole night. She knew he left. She knew that he had left earlier as well. You have his search. How do the police track a SIM card even if it's not installed in the phone? Is it possible or not? That's a pretty significant search. Especially after he admitted on the stand that he had taken his SIM card out of the number that was used to call and receive calls from Marcel Johnson before the murder and after the murder. So he's clearly trying to find a way to make sure that after taking that SIM card out, it is not going to be used against him. Hoping. Some other things about his testimony. He worked for TMS. But as he testified on cross-examination by Mr. Grau, they didn't send him on any jobs for a month after being hired, coincidentally or conveniently, which was after the murder. They hire him and then they say, okay, go home, sit down, and we'll just call you whatever. Then a month later they say, okay, come on up to Lake Placid, New York. The snow is apparently very hard. So his phone completely broke. He drops it in the snow. Completely. Again, I'm not an expert on snow, but first off, I think it's common knowledge that it's soft, typically. And as long as the phone is picked up pretty quickly, I would submit to you that it's not going to cause the phone to just completely break. But he holds on to the phone, moves the SIM card, and gets a new phone because that phone broke. Not because he was getting kicked off the plan. That's his motive. He got that new phone, according to him, but that phone broke. Why did the phone break? Question. When he was arrested, he had 3 backup phones. In case, I guess, he dropped 2 others in the snow. 3 backup phones on. One had just Wi-Fi access. Talking about how he was terrified by the search warrant that was served on his mother's house. Yet being terrified, as he might have been, at no point does he reach out to the detective and say, why on earth are you searching my mother's house? Terrified, upset, whatever you want to call it. Why does he not want to get to the bottom of this? This is completely out of left field. Now he talks, again, we talked about earlier about how he downplayed his friendship with Marcel Johnson. Talked about how they were growing apart. Again, feelings getting hurt over the birthday, which was in November of 2022. Testified that he didn't agree with Johnson's activity. This is one of the reasons why he's not hanging out with Johnson anymore. Because he's selling weed. Well, he had no problem buying weed from him, going and smoking weed with him. He's not going to be around somebody, I guess, when they're selling weed. He admitted that they still hung out here and there. But he had told detectives earlier that he had not hung out with Marcel since September earlier that year. And again, there are those multiple calls between the defendant and Marcel Johnson for third. His testimony was, I never said something, again, that Kobe just completely fabricated, the manual completely fabricated. I don't know why. Kobe was trying to protect his brother. We already talked about why that makes 0 sense. Kobe not be protecting his brother by implicating one of his brother's best friends. That's not how it works. What we didn't hear was any explanation as to why Emmanuel would make up the statement. Hear any of that was on Sam. And again, this just kind of ties back to the data, but he said he was asleep when Karen Yaga arrived, and that goes back to the data transmission information that you have, and how that does not indicate somebody is manually using it. Show that there was being data was being transmitted while he's supposedly asleep, waiting for Karen Yaga to arrive. One of the interesting points of his cross-examination, he stated, yeah, I went down to the park, lit up a joint, whatever, blunt, had a hit or two or whatever, shared, I don't know. He said he was there for about 5 to 10 minutes. A little quick little visit down there, say hey to my boys, go back up home. Problem is that the cell phone data shows that at the earliest he was in that location where the park is at 8:18 p.m. He used to keep him in that area until 8:45 p.m. There for 30 minutes. That's not just a quick little visit. That's not a quick conversation. That's not a quick little smoke off point or whatever. That's him there with those other individuals talking about what had happened, making the statements that Kobe and Emmanuel said he made. On cross-examination, when asked about that search, about whether they can track the SIM card, he said, I delete everything I search. Oops. Didn't delete that history showing that he searched for Marcel. Okay, so inmate search. Didn't do that. He doesn't delete everything he searched. Didn't work. He admitted that he knows about 320. Knows Emmanuel. Knows Isaiah. Knows Kobe. Knows Marcel. Again, brothers with Emmanuel. Really good friends, best friends with Marcella, at least at one point, according to him. All people that he hung out with. You think he has no interest in doing anything that would benefit them? No interest in maybe getting some vengeance or retribution on their behalf, especially with Emmanuel's little brother being shot. Finding Marcel being shot in that barbershop incident. Obi getting jumped. I think he has no interest in doing something to get back at free. And at the very end, he admitted he had lied to police multiple times to protect himself. Lied to the police multiple times to protect himself. I submit to you that is exactly what he was doing, trying to protect himself. Members of the jury, when Mr. Garard stated that he sprayed it in front of his friends, in front of Kobe, in front of Emmanuel, I don't think he expected that they would come into court, come to the police, and tell them what they heard. Fortunately, victims in this case, unfortunately for Mr. Garard, they did. They came in there and testified to what they heard. But the thing is that statement alone is not what the state is relying on. That statement is merely confirmation of the other evidence in the case showing what happened or inactive. Jury selection, defense counsel said that the defendant was cloaked in innocence. And that's true, he was. That cloak has been ripped off. Now you all see him for what he truly is. Guilty on all counts.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.